here we are. We're looking at Remedyforce, and we're just going to start off with the administrative capabilities that I spoke of. And so, if we start off with our, if we actually start off with our service level agreements, we can go here in our workspace, the Remedyforce workspace. And from that, we'll be able to take a quick look here at the SLA. So again, what this feature allows us to do is to have an SLA without specifying a service. So that is something that you previously had to have. You had to name your service as well as you had to name your users. And so you'll notice here in this particular agreement that I'm launching, the generic SLA here, that a service is not defined and nor is the account defined. Well, technically, we're just saying that any account that's in Remedyforce, this record would apply to, or this SLA would apply to. So agreement applies to all accounts. But if we wanted to name a specific account and still have generic SLAs, we could do that. And again, the reason why we might do this is that we haven't, fully populated or defined what our service catalog looks like and what the content of that service catalog is. And so this would allow you to use the SLA module if you haven't gotten to that point. And even if you had defined an SLA, it's probably a good idea to have a backup and a catch-all in the event that a service wasn't named when the incident was registered, or there was a brand new service that was introduced but we didn't build out an SLA if that slipped through the cracks some way or another. So at this point, again, notice there's no service, and you can utilize one or all of your accounts to determine the SLA, that this SLA gets applied to the record. Okay, and that's one other thing to talk about while we're here on SLAs is if we look at the service targets that I have defined, one of the options is to define the from address on the email. So when these milestones are met, or I guess have arrived, if you will, then at that point, what's the email address that's going to be used for specifying that? And so we do have the capability of defining that in our milestones. And so those are a couple of things as it relates to the to administration from the standpoint of SLAs. The other component that I wanted to show you real quickly here is if we go back to the Remedyforce administration, this console, and before long, all of the, everything from SLAs, all of that will be under this one console. And I would say that probably 90% of the things that you're going to do are accessible from the Remedyforce administrative console. So if we look here under application settings, and specifically if we look at our consoles option, at this point, and this is again new, but one, we can enable or disable the console functionality, and two, we have the ability to determine whether this console is going to be a single column or do we want two columns. And this is specifically for the incident or task that we can configure that. And it is important to note that right at the moment, the only two consoles that exist are for incident and task. So change or problem, release, they are not using the console. You don't have a console for those modules at this time. And I think that's okay for most customers because, frankly, the majority of what you're working with, and you want your service desk to have access to the incident console. But if we look at the incident console again, we can again define the layout And then also, as we look at the profiles that are defined in the Remedyforce implementation, so for example, we've got our service desk staff. Well, what available actions do I want to give them? So do I want to give them the ability to reopen an incident? Maybe not. Adding a note, printing, those types of things. In terms of the available tools, we can, again, selectively choose what tools that particular profile would have access to. And I typically open it up for all, just because in a demonstration scenario, I want to make sure that I've got access to all of these items. But again, you can selectively choose the content and the functionality that's made available through the console through here. Okay? If we go back to the application settings, a couple of other things, and this is also where we will configure our surveys, so I'll come back to that here in a moment. And what I'd like to do next is start by, let's talk about some of these capabilities that the console gives us. When we talk about the incident console, what do we actually, what are some of these new things, as well as maybe just a quick overview of some of the new capability. So if you've looked at the console in the past, you'll notice a lot more graphical stuff. That's really the first and most obvious thing. The three columns that are most noted here are, one, the due date progress. So you'll notice that I have some items that are red, I have the red light, some items with green, and at least earlier I had some yellow, so it may have already passed enough. But basically, green means that the due date, when you registered that incident, if you had 8 hours to resolve that, up to 50%, so the first 4 hours, it will appear green. Anything from hour 4 on to hour 8 will appear as yellow. That means that you're on the latter half of that due date or that SLA that was assigned to this record. And then obviously red means I've exceeded my SLA. In addition, you'll notice the green and the red, the green checkbox and the red stop icon, I guess you could say, and this simply means that when I close this incident, this is a closed record, I met my SLA. This is a good thing. On the other hand, when I closed this incident, I had actually missed my SLA, so that's not such a good thing. Now, the other column here is the new incident, and if I look here, this is really bad, right? I've got Jill Smith that has registered an incident, and we can, bring this over and see a little bit more information about what's going on, but has something to do with her laptop. But notice, I've exceeded my due date, so I've failed my SLA at this point, and I haven't even looked at it. And the reason I know I haven't looked at it is because of this little concierge desk icon, or bell icon, if you will, that appears. And this is basically telling me that this is a new incident and no one has done anything with it. So that's really a bad thing here. Now, the third column, the third column would be the VIP clients. So any of these records where we can see the person, that is a VIP. So that's an immediate graphical display that, I might need to pay attention to these records a little bit more. And certainly I can double-click and change the sort order on any of these records. So if I wanted to see all my new incidents up at the top, I just double-click and there it is. Okay, so right from the console, that's nice. Those are some nice visual cues that the staff member has. Now, if we look at if we were to register a new incident here, we'll click on the new, and from here, a couple of things. One, let's register an incident for my favorite employee, and that's Peter Campbell. So Peter Campbell's having an issue, and he begins to tell us that he specifically is having a problem with his laptop. So he selects the icon to the right of the category field. We're seeing a nice graphical display, a hierarchical tree display of our categories. And so if we look under hardware, at this point I can choose laptop and then OK. And so that category has been applied to the record. Now, at this point, Peter starts telling me a little bit more about what's going on. And maybe one of the things that I want to do is to see, well, one, are there any other similar issues like that going on? And so I can simply go to my agent tools and spawn off the incident matching. So again, this was a feature that was introduced in the previous version, but you had to save the record first. Now you have the ability to conduct your incident matching before saving the record. And at this point, when I click on that, I'm now getting a number of incidents that match. Now, the criteria that it's looking at when you get this list is the client ID and category. There is actually one other field that is available, but because I've only identified the category and client ID, these are the two fields. Now, for one reason or another, maybe I'm not interested in seeing a match of this user's other records, so I can uncheck that, apply, and now I would no longer see Peter Campbell or the records that were assigned specifically to Peter Campbell, but rather I'm seeing all of the records where there was a laptop issue. And by looking at this, I can, okay, well, maybe I've got these, 2 or 3, 4 different records. By the way, the ones that are still open, hopefully you can see this, but the checkbox is slightly shaded gray, and so that's a really simple visual indicator letting me know that this record is open. The ones that are white white. I can't do anything with those because they're already closed. But if we select these, now I have the option of matching them to that parent record, that incident that I had already registered, and so I can do that simply by selecting that. Now, I can choose the different value of the status value that I want to assign it to. Now, the one thing I will say, if the record hasn't been saved, I can't link it yet. But you can certainly match and see if there's any trends that are going on before saving. So here again, if we look at this record, let's save it. If I wanted to go back and do another incident matching and actually link those records, I'd have the ability of doing that. But so the record's been saved successfully. If we go back here to incident matching, notice the other functionality that's now available to us there on the agent tools. And here again, I can choose the records I want to match. Notice that the link button is now linked, and by default it is going to link them and close these records because you're basically establishing this parent-child relationship. But if you still wanted to keep these records open and maybe change the status to in progress, you could very easily do that, and that will link them. Okay. And we can see those linked records here on our related list going to the linked incidents. And so there's the couple of incidents that we had linked there. So again, the incident matching allows the agent to begin to look and see if there's trends before they've saved the record, and then once the record is saved, ultimately I can link the two together. Okay. Another feature was the ability to add a note right from the actions. So if I wanted to add a note, I don't have to go over to the related list and go to the history tab. I can just simply go right here into actions and add note, type in my note, whatever that might be. And from here, if I wanted to document the amount of time I've spent, maybe I spent 20 minutes, or actually that's hours. So let's say we spent 20 minutes doing, whatever we had documented. We can add that, and that is captured.